Hi everyone, this is Zoe. I'm back with another summary video of the American Chess Magazine puzzle calendar. Let's get into the puzzles. It was composed by Yuri Slushkov in 1961. Again, all the puzzles in this series are white to move, mate in 2. If you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 4 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. So here in this position, my first thought was, well, my queen's lined up against the king. Let's try some sort of discover attack. Rook takes e6 came to mind, but here black can play rook e5. And if white captures, then the king can run to c4. It's a similar problem for all the other discovered attacks. For example, rook f4 trying to pin this rook to the king. Black has rook e5, and even though you can take it for free, black's king can still run to c4. So the problem in this position was the king can always run to c4. So the way you solve that is by moving your knight. But I didn't really see where the knight could go immediately. I went on a different route, which is what if it's black to move? So if it's black to move here, you find that black really doesn't have that many moves because the pieces are all so restricted and they have almost no mobility. If the rook on e4 moves to f4, then rook takes f4 is double check and it controls c4, so this is mate. If rook 4 to e5, then white has rook f4 checkmate. Here the rook is being pinned to the king, so rook e4 blocking is not an option. If rook 6 to e5, then white has rook d6 check. Sorry, this is not checkmate because black can block with rook to. Black can run with king to c4, but white does have. What is it? Here, actually, white doesn't have a checkmate. If rook takes f6, similar problem, queen takes d6, queen takes f6 is not checkmate because king to c4. So basically, actually, I said it wrong in the beginning. The only piece of black's that's restricted is this rook. Otherwise, black can still run, and black can still push, and black can still move this rook. So then, one way to take care of both the pawn pushing and the king running is knight to e1. Oh, it's white to move. Yes, knight to e1. If g3, then knight f3 is checkmate, and the king cannot run anymore. It's literally not legal. If king to e5, white has white doesn't have checkmate here because rook f5. Oh, hang on, rook f5 is checkmate. Okay, if king e5, then rook f5 is checkmate. But here the problem is that black can move the rook. So for example, even if just rook takes f6, queen takes f6 is not checkmate because black can still block. Therefore, I finally came up with the answer. The way to stop that would be knight to e5. If rook takes f6 now, then white has knight 5 to c6 checkmate because the rook is pinned to the king, therefore black cannot take. And after knight e5, if king takes, then white has rook f5 checkmate still. If the pawn pushes, knight f3 is still checkmate. If rook takes e5, rook f4 is still checkmate. If rook takes, then rook d6 is checkmate. Because now the knight's moved, so king c4 is not an option. So after knight e5, black is in zugzwang, and no matter what, white will give checkmate on the next turn. Second, it was composed by F. Murphy in 1941. Again, if you want to solve the puzzle for yourself, then go ahead and pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 5 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. So here, there's definitely a very large shock factor here because all the pawns seem like they're moving in the wrong direction. Black's pawns are moving this way, which means the pawn can take the queen next move. And also it looks like black just has so many pieces, so it was definitely a very surprising puzzle to see, and I thought it'd be very hard. But once you start looking at the position, you realize that black's king is really, really trapped. It cannot go here because of the bishop, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. It's completely boxed in right now. But the problem is if black does manage to take white's queen, then at some point the king might be able to run to d3. So once I saw that the black king was kind of trapped, I tried to maneuver my way into checks. So the obvious one, of course, is knight takes e2 with the idea of playing knight g3 or other knight to g3. Here the problem, though, is that black can just play c takes b3 or something. If white gives a check here, then the king can run to e3. And if knight e to g3 check, black does have king to d3. Then for a brief second, I considered trying to... For a brief second in the starting position, I considered trying to promote this pawn because the pawn is going this way. But the problem is the pawn doesn't promote with check, so it's impossible to have mate in 2 since you do need to move the star square bishop away first. So then after that, I tried to maneuver my queen into checks, but there just weren't many squares to do that, like queen g3 or something. The knight can just take, and if takes, then the king can still run. But then I came up with the idea if my knight could go to f2 check, then the problem is that, the idea is that the knight's controlling d3, so even if my queen gets taken, it'd still be checkmate. Of course, the easiest way to get the knight to f2 is just knight to h3. Then, if g takes h3, queen f3 is checkmate. If black takes on b3, no matter how they take, knight f2 is checkmate. So after knight h3, black actually cannot stop knight f2 checkmate. The knight could move to open the queen, stopping queen f2. But for example, after the knight moves here or something, white has the option of playing knight to g3 checkmate because the knight on e2 was originally guarding the g3 square. So this puzzle, once I got over the initial shock, it was kind of easier. That's why I gave this a difficulty rating of 5 out of 10 and a satisfaction of 5 out of 5. One interesting note about this puzzle, I set up Stockfish to check my answer like after I submitted it, and then it took it like a whole minute to find knight h3. It kept saying to play other moves. That's just something interesting I found about this puzzle. This is the puzzle for March 3rd. It was composed by Percy Blake in 1921. Again, if you want to solve the puzzle for yourself, then pause the video here. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 5 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 4.5 out of 5. So here, it's kind of surprising, like the pieces are all kind of in a cube here. Black's king is very trapped, and there is the possibility of a discovered checkmate, hopefully. But the problem is that everything just falls a little bit short. If rook b6, then king takes c4. If rook c5, then king a6. If other rook to c5, then king takes a4. I mean, the cube is so artfully arranged that every single check fails because of one thing, and like only one thing. So that was really annoying. So I think I knew from the start, I thought from the start that I would try to make this discovered check work somehow. But it was really hard to like guard the a6 square or something. If I tried knight c5, for example, then the problem is king takes c4. And even though this knight has discoveries, the king can always run somewhere. I also considered trying to play, for example, queen c8, maneuvering the queen in. But the problem here is that black can just play something like rook takes c4. And if queen b7, then king takes a4. White has no checkmate available here, sadly. If queen b8 check, then the problem is black can take on a4 again. Black is always like so really close. But then I realized that black doesn't really have that many moves themselves. Like if anything takes on c4, then rook b6 is checkmate. If the rook takes, then rook b6 is still checkmate. If the bishop moves, then rook takes b4 is checkmate. If this rook moves, then white has rook c5 checkmate. So black's pieces are all kind of really tied down, but it's hard for white to come up with a Zugzwang checkmate just because this knight isn't doing anything. Well, the knight's guarding e5, I suppose, but the thing is, it's hard for white to pass the turn. Like if king f7, for example, knight g5 check ruins any chances for checkmate. If white just passes the move, black has a6 as a waiting. Black doesn't. Rook c5 is checkmate. But for example, the problem with king g7 is that black can just play king takes a4. Actually, black cannot. Rook a6 checkmate. Hang on. The problem with king g7 is that black can play knight e5, and even if the queen takes, king takes a4. So the knight is kind of in a really bad place right now. It's kind of hard to guard. So I came up with the idea of trying to move the knight, specifically knight to c3. So I started with playing something like bishop to d4, but the problem with this one is even though white's threatening knight c3 checkmate, black can just guard it with bishop b2, and now rook c5 still fails. This rook to c5 still also fails. Rook to b6 still doesn't work. So the problem is the bishop was allowed to move, and now c3 is guarded. So then finally I came up with the correct answer that in the beginning, you have to start with bishop to d2. Now if bishop b2, the bishop is attacking the rook, so it allows rook takes b4 checkmate. And if knight takes if knight takes d2, then white still has knight c3 checkmate. Black has no way to stop the threat of knight c3, so then white does have forced mate in 2. This weekend, March 4th to 5th, it was composed by A.L. Brown in 1901. Again, if you want to solve this puzzle for yourself, then pause the video here. White to move, mate in 2. So for me, this puzzle had a difficulty rating of 2 out of 10 and a satisfaction rating of 5 out of 5. So here, white looks like they're up so much material. So technically, in a real game, it wouldn't matter if you mate in exactly 2 moves or not. But this is an artistic puzzle, so the idea is to mate in exactly 2 moves. Here, I think I saw from the start, part of the reason why it was a bit easier for me, that White's idea should be to restrict the king from coming to c4. Once it runs here, I mean, like, it has a lot of potential squares to run to in the future. The only way to stop king c4 immediately is by playing queen to h4, but that doesn't really work because the queen was active, like, close to the king. Now it's kind of far away. If Black just plays something like king d6, then White does not have mate in 1. Yeah, White doesn't have mate in 1 because queen check, king e7. So then I thought, okay, what if instead of stopping king c4 the move, like literally, what if I make it so that after king c4 there's some sort of mate? So I realized that after king c4, if I can play queen d3 checkmate, then that'd be great. So then I came up with the move queen e3, which doesn't happen to be the right answer. If king c4, then queen d3. And if pawn d6, then White has bishop e6 checkmate. Finally, Black's only other legal move, king d6, runs into queen takes c5 checkmate. So here, as long as you use prophylaxis, seeing that once you stop king c4, then you have checkmate, then the puzzle does become a bit easier. That's why I gave us a difficulty rating of 2 out of 10 and a satisfaction of 5 out of 5. So those were the puzzles for this second half of the week. I hope you enjoyed them. I feel like this week, this part, even though there were a lot more pieces than usual, but I feel like the ideas were a lot clearer and there weren't as many opponent responses. I feel like in general, this week's puzzle were a bit easier. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you like my content, please like and subscribe. And that's all for today. Bye!